Hey everyone, Ariel Adams here with the Superlative Podcast. My guest today is Perri Dash, the co-founder of the Wrist Check Podcast. Perri, welcome.
Thank you, Ariel. I'm happy to be here.
So you're a fellow podcaster in the space, and I think one of the areas I want to start at is the surprising, we'll call it success and popularity of watch podcasts, despite I'll call it the sort of inherent irony that it's a non-visual medium in a visual space, right? Like, that's kind of funny.
It is, yes.
People are in it for the watches, and that's something you have to like enjoy with your eyes. Yet, all of a sudden, this it's really like a sub-industry at this point of watch podcasts is sort of erupted. What's your sense on why watch podcasts are popular?
It's a really great question. I know for us, so Wrist Check Podcast, we launched it about 3 years ago. And essentially it's a show founded by three friends who love watches. And so for us, it was really about passion and connection. I think that there was something that we were all impacted by, when COVID happened towards the end, when everything started to get lifted, there was kind of like this fervor and this reaction everyone had. They wanted to kind of be in rooms with one another again. Simultaneously, you had watch media exploding, right? Like all of these podcasters, you had, shows and programs like that, which you do, Teddy Baldassar and all these guys really becoming quite popular. So much so we were consuming the same content. And initially, I know for us, we were kind of just looking to get out of the house and get back outside. And, one of the resources that we had were organizations like Red Bar, who provided, spaces for watch collectors and enthusiasts to get together. And we sort of got the idea, it would be really cool if we came together and did something like a podcast. And ours is a video podcast. So when we first started, we started with video and audio. We thought that would be something that was important to cast sort of like a wider net to appeal to the collectors that we know, but also to like our friends and family that might just be somewhat interested in watches. And it really provided us an avenue to just share our passion with everyone, to connect with more people, and to kind of reinvigorate that spirit in the community of people getting back outside and getting back together.
I've noticed something really interesting since I got started and how people get started today. It seems that today, becoming a watch lover is an inherently social thing, meaning you sort of get into it because you see other people talking about it, and that's exciting, and you want to be a part of that, and you begin with that sort of social element. Yes, for me, you began in a totally different way. There was no social element. It began with a relationship between myself and products, right? Like I'd see watches or I'd read about them. I think that's cool. Mm-hmm. I had no one to talk about them with. I mean, arguably, I started aBlogtoWatch because I was like, well, since none of my friends in real life care about watches, I'll just find some on the internet. That's a very legitimate explanation of why I got started. And I had to discover the community as a result of that. I had to, in fact, sort of make the community in a lot of ways. There were sort of the forums, but those are sort of closed clubs. They weren't really inviting, new people in. Yeah. And now, that was 2007. So, going on close to 18 years later now, it's a totally different thing. Whereas if you are even moderately curious about watches, there is somebody that wants to speak to you right away, right?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. And that was a main driving force for us too. One of the things that we felt that we could provide that we didn't see, the industry is full of people who are experts, full of people who are extremely knowledgeable. We have a shared passion for the history, a thirst for the knowledge. We dive into that as much as we can, but we don't position ourselves as experts. We are sort of enthusiasts first. And we come from the place of community. So, when we got started, it was sort of like, hey, there's a space that I feel is empty where we can be our authentic selves. We don't have to sound like experts, but we can speak in a tone and in a way where we can share knowledge that we know, but also provide a platform that's open enough to engage the audience and allow them to share that same knowledge with us. And so we've created that platform with WCP where people, as you know, in podcasting, if you get something wrong, we'll happily let you know in the comments that you got something wrong, and we'll correct you. But we've also, been fortunate enough to have some really great guests on our show who have shared amazing information, insight with us that has then allowed us to share that with our audience. And I think that's what's really led to the growth is, the fact that we fostered an inclusive space. And inclusive meaning where we prize diversity, not only amongst collectors, but diversity in collection, diversity in knowledge, and diversity in understanding in your journey, in your watch collecting journey, right? Like, so we'll have heavy hitter collectors on where we're talking about Patek and we're talking about some indie stuff, but then we'll have occasion like that one guy who has a really obscure collection of like Seikos or something. And, it's just as equally interesting and he has amazing knowledge and passion to share.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think what's been abundantly clear to me is that the diversity of media out there, like the different podcasts and the different voices, is directly related to the diversity in the public.
Yep.
No one of us can speak to all types of buyers out there, right? I speak 100%. To a certain subset of people that can relate to me, and there's plenty of people I can't relate to. So every time there's a successful new group, what I think it is evidence that there's community out there who would like watches, who maybe already does, but isn't appropriately being spoken to in a relatable way. And I think that's why for so many years to brands, I've said you need to diversify your marketing. You have these like boring, inert messages that really don't speak to anyone. There's a better chance that this, group of passionate individuals are doing a podcast are going to reach somebody with why your brand is worth talking about than your marketing. And so for me, this popularity of the media voices is a direct reflection on the fact that the brands don't market themselves well, have very linear, narrow voices, if any voice at all. And that sort of culturally Swiss, often Swiss, way of speaking is simply not accessible to the vast majority of Americans. I mean, I'm someone that had to travel to Europe many, many times. I started doing so before I was in the watch industry as a child and stuff like that, to understand that they speak differently and they market differently. And I sort of had to open my mind. Your average American or someone that living in parts of Asia or wherever that doesn't have that experience with European culture is just immediately, just goes right over their head. Not in a bad way, but like, it's just not speaking to me.
It's just different, yeah.
Yeah, and so we do that hard work of speaking to the communities and bringing them interest. And I think this is the interesting part of the conversation. It's hard to get credit for that, especially in the form of business, whereas there is this huge popularity out there from the audience where they want to consume content like this. They want to listen to Risk Check podcast. They want to read aBlogtoWatch. Being able to create a business around it is a sort of like the hurdle that no one has quite seemed to figure out effectively. I've been studying, I talk about the business model of the watch industry probably more than anyone else. I still have yet to find a lot of sustainable business models. It's interesting in today's internet information economy how content can be popular, yet it still can be, we'll say, challenging to create a revenue stream around it.
That's an excellent point, and one of the first hurdles that we had to tackle shortly after we started, coming from a place of passion, obviously it's like, okay, well, we bootstrapped it ourselves just because we enjoy doing it. But then you realize over time, man, this costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right.
And you need a reason to do it. Like, it's like hobby or job, hobby or job.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I think initially we had ideas of, how we're going to finance this thing. Okay. And so first it was like, we'll put the money up ourselves just because we really want to do this. And in those formative days, it's funny when I go back and I look at like some of our first episodes, just to be cost effective, because it was video and audio, we would bring a change of clothes with us. And so we'd have like a 2-hour window to record something. We do like the first hour to 40 minutes and then change our clothes and then get back in front of the camera and go again. And so
Nice.
the game was efficiency. And so we knew, okay, well, we've got to put out as many episodes as possible. So we said, all right, we'll put out an episode every Wednesday. Risk Check Wednesday was a thing on social media. The podcast we called Risk Check Podcast. It just seemed like it would work. And so we said, we're going to put out an episode every single Wednesday. And then shortly after that, we got maybe after our 8th or 9th episode, we got our first guest, the CEO of Oris. We had VJ Geronimo on, a gentleman who I love dearly. And then we started having conversations with potential sponsors. I think very early on, people saw that, okay, there's something different here. The community likes you. Because as we were putting out content, we were outside, we were offline and online. Right. And I think that made like a really big difference for us because it helped our popularity grow exponentially really, really quickly. And so we just figured, maybe sponsorship is the way. And that worked for us for the first year. We're still in a position where it thrives with sponsorship, but we're still, to your point, figuring out like, all right, well, what are the other ways that we can monetize this thing? And so that led to a partnership with Wolf. We released our first travel case, which did exceptionally well. And it's always great to have those wins. And now we kind of find ourselves at this crossroads again, where it's like, okay, what's the next step? Like we've got this thing financed and it's paying for itself. And how do we get paid from this? And so we've recently been fortunate enough to, we got some funding, which has kind of gotten us to another level. And we're coming up with different like monetization plans and strategies. But it's hard, when you're passionate about this thing and you're trying to take it to the next level and turn it into a business, it's not easy. And we look at even the challenges that like companies like Hodinkee, has had, where they're obviously much larger than a podcast, but how do you turn this into a viable business? I think we have some really great ideas that we'll be unleashing in the near future in terms of the types of content that will then be diversifying. We're opening our own studio in August. So there's some surprises on the way, but to your point, it's incredibly difficult.
The really crux of the difficulty is the fact that the watch industry is a marketing-driven industry, yet there's a hesitation to spend money on marketing. There's a very real effort to avoid spending. Part of it is a response to the fact that there are more places they can spend than they have money for. That is a very true thing, but that is true with any type of company that advertises. There's an infinite number of places to advertise, yet they still do. I always like to sort of draw parallels between other industries and the watch industry and how much other companies that sell things that are luxury products or men's items, fashion items, tools, market incessantly and ongoingly. Yet this industry still likes to sort of pretend that they don't need to a lot. So the problem is that sort of like the watering hole, so to say, is very small and not particularly productive. Sure. That is one issue. The other issue is that a lot of this stuff is considered very new media. So it's not just the watch space where it's difficult to monetize. It's across all industries. And, one of the things that we're up against is this sort of slick nature of like, say, Facebook advertising that has all these numbers and metrics. It means nothing and is unauditable, right? Like it's just whatever Meta says it is. But in podcasting space, the performance metrics you can show advertisers are complicated to record, convoluted. There's different places that people download content. Those different types of places have different metrics available to them. And so the issue is that the podcasting space, for better or worse, is very much the Wild West. And we'll talk about that more. I have a lot more to say about that. But that presents sort of an innovator or pioneer challenge where there's like broad open space to do stuff, yet there isn't infrastructure or things like that. So there is a rate of failure simply because there isn't a guarantee of success.
No, it's true. And, it's funny because a lot of what's helped us, and especially in those early days, like being able to show that like, hey, we got 1,000 views on YouTube or 500 listens across. It's like, it doesn't really mean anything to them because they're looking at like, well, this person on Instagram has 100,000 followers. What are you going to tell me why I should spend money with you versus like going to get this influencer? But the key difference for us, I think, is context, right? And so the context that I would provide to the sponsors who are advertising with us is look at who's tuning in. And so one of the initial sponsors we worked with, I don't know if I should name them, but we did like a trial run and they gave us sort of like a purchase code. And what we discovered was after we ran that code was our audience was spending a lot of money.
Sure.
Right. And then there was another incident where we were invited to an event by a brand. I had no idea how they heard of us, but they're like, well, we've got this client, John so-and-so, who just bought a $50,000 watch and he was raving about your show. And so the community has always been there for us because these guys and these women who are very passionate about this, tuning into the show very early and saying, well, this is different. This is new. There isn't anything quite like this. I like this. More people ought to pay attention to this. And we've kind of used that. You talk about innovating, like we've had to innovate our conversations that we've had with these brands in order to gain, money from them to continue to grow this thing.
The practical reality is if you're the type of person that listens to a watch podcast or consumes watch media, it's because you're probably spending money on watches, right?
Yeah.
At some frequency. Maybe it's not a watch a week, but the studies I've done has found that the majority of people who consume watch media buy at least one watch a year, easy.
Yep.
Often more. So when we get people riled up about something and they buy, it's kind of expected. You're like, oh, that's going to happen. The problem is this is an industry, and I think I'll get to the meat of the issue, that one isn't accustomed to sharing money with the people that help them make money.
Yeah.
And two, in the media space, and this is an interesting manifestation of the sort of Wild West environment, is that they always think there's someone else there that can give them what you give them for free. It isn't until they have no free options that they will start to pay for it. The European mentality to investment isn't, let's go straight to the thing that'll help us. Americans are like that. We're like, let's just get to the point. Yeah. They're like, can we spend nothing? Let's try that. No.
Right.
Can we spend a tiny bit, but almost nothing? Let's try that. No. So they're more patient. They will wait it out, but they will only step up their investment gradually, slowly. While we're like, oh my God, you need to get to 10 right now. You're at like 1.5. And they're just like, no, maybe it'll work at 3. And so they take every minor step up in investment prior to getting to what you need to. Whereas Americans are like, that's dumb. Why would you waste all that time and opportunity? And that's one of the differences, in my opinion, between sort of the European investor mentality and the American investor mentality. But the reality is that they are faced with a lot of what they see as being free options, or a lot of very, very low cost options. And this is one of the things that us content creators need to overcome, is the idea that brands feel like they can manipulate for a while, and by the time we get wise to it, they'll move on to someone else who isn't as wise.
Yeah.
And this has been an issue before there were podcasts. This is something they did when there was print publications. But this is a very, very real silent battle that happens between content creators and brands at all levels of luxury. And there's good points on both sides. But the reality is that it is very hard to make money as a content creator, despite the fact that even small programs can have a big impact if they're speaking to an underserved audience.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I think the way you described it as like sort of this silent war, silent battle is key. But I think the way that we win that as content creators is amongst ourselves to share information.
Yeah.
And that's helped us a great deal. Speaking to other people in the field, speaking to other influencers.
Like, do not accept promises from this brand kind of thing.
Either don't do that, or this is how much they paid for me to do X, Y, and Z.
The first year I was doing, the very first year, Perri, I thought to myself, you know what, like watch writers need, because that's all it was at the time. It was like a union. Like there's no trade body or collective voice. I saw how brands would ping pong people off of one another and play egos off of them. And this is not new at all. They've been playing these games. And I thought if only there was some ability for the writing professional community to have a group, this could advance their interest. The brands would never have anything to do with it. They would hate it. But the problem has become really, rather than us being staff of powerful publications, the vast majority of people who do things about watches related content, whether it's writing or video or whatever, are freelancers essentially, or very small groups. And so the power of us is quite low compared to the brands, who again feel like every single day there's people who want to give them free content. And part of the problem is because a lot of these are ego-based companies, they're inherently impractical about spending. They would rather not spend and not get performance than and they would rather have someone go to them and be like, I love you. I want to share you for free because you're so amazing. Mm-hmm. But they don't realize that like a professional content creator needs further incentives than that. That gets you interested. But if you're going to do it ongoingly, like there's got to be an upside for both parties.
Yeah, no, there does. But I think, the chips lying where they are, this is what we have to deal with. Right. And so what we do with WCP and just what I do with other content creators, because I'm collaborative. I work with everybody. And I think that's been one of the greatest benefits to us, is letting people in the community know, like, I'm not in competition with you. Right. Even if we're speaking to, we might share members in our audience, they're getting different things from us. And we can work with one another. We can help one another. So it's not uncommon for me to collaborate on events with other content creators or even watch clubs. What way can I service you? And what way can you service me? Maybe you're delivering me an audience and I'm taking care of media for you. Maybe it's vice versa. Maybe we put together an event program and we pitch it to a brand. We have some other partner that they really love, and we sell a package to them and say, hey, this is something that you ought to take a look at and be part of. And if you're not, we've got X, Y, and Z that's coming on board next. So you might want to take a look at this.
Well, the funny thing is you have to distinguish yourself in that, right? Like that should be the norm, but you have to be like, oh no, we're not one of those outfits trying to do everything by ourselves. We're the ones that want it. I mean, I'm the same way as you. I've always been open to working with others, but it's funny that you have to actually announce that's not the default.
Yeah. It is. I mean, I think, in most arenas, right, especially now in the content world, during COVID, the saying, like, we all got like fat and rich. It seems like the views were just a lot easier. Everyone was at home. They're watching YouTube nonstop. And now there's almost like a scarcity mindset. And so a lot more people are a little more hesitant to collaborating with one another. They feel that, to your point, the brands don't want to spend. So, let me kind of hoard everything for myself. And to me, it doesn't work that way. I feel like the more that we team up together, we can, command money. And I do this all the time with everyone. I mean, even today, I'm planning an event for a watch group. They're based in DC. They want to do an event in Michigan. And they had a small budget. I got them a watch brand to cover the entire budget for the event.
That's cool.
You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, because I believe in what they do and they service my platform. Whenever I attend their events, their community, which is like all over the U.S. now, they're opening up chapters. This official CP time in Washington, D.C. They're doing an event in Michigan. They're doing another one in L.A. We did an event in Miami last year. But they're people, they tune into our show. This is one of the, when they have an event and we show up, it's like, oh my God, the Risk Check Pod guys are here. Okay, great. So I'm incentivized to help them grow simply based on the fact that their growth is a grow in my audience base.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that more content creators, we have to get creative like that. So if I could give you some further background, my family came from the music industry. And so I look at content creation similar to the music industry.
I was so going to bring up a band analogy, so I'm really glad that you brought that up. So please keep going with what you're going to say.
So it's like breaking an artist, right? It's like, okay, the show that's the package, right? This is the artist. You want to say this is Jay-Z, Aerosmith, whatever you want to call it. That's that.
Is that the watch brand in this context?
In this context, it's the podcast.
Oh, okay.
Right. So each episode is like a single, right? And so we can put that single out and we can watch how it performs. And then when clubs that we're connected with are, doing events, and sometimes we do our own events, that's like a show, right? We've got to touch the ground and engage the audience. So that's a performance on another level, even if it's not a live taping, which we do often, right? Just showing up and engaging the community, having people get excited by our presence and say, hey, can I take a picture with you? Can we do a wrist shot? So important. It's like, imagine if your favorite artist or band came, was in town and was just like, we're just going to kick it at this event and we're going to hang out with the people who are fans of these guys. You'd be like, man, this is super cool. Saying.
So I think I like this. So what you're doing is you're adapting a business model of, we'll call it a music group, and you're saying if that works there, why can't it work for an interest-based podcast program with just some slight adaptations? It's at least a way of creating a sustainable business model where there isn't one. That's quite clever.
Exactly. And then now, we have this relationship with Wolf. So we've got a travel case that we're selling. That's merch.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one leg that we're establishing. Now we're focused on creating a paywall for other types of content that our audience might really, really want. Right. That's the album, and then we'll continue to break this down in as many forms as possible. Now, wait until I launch the mega label and I have other artists.
Hey, having the network is the dream. I hear you.
Right.
I hear you.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. So that's kind of been the mindset that I approached it with, and I came into it understanding that, listen, it was going to be saturated, right? Because I saw what was happening in the watch market, and I was like, everybody wants to be a watch collector now, and you had some people doing it for the right reasons. Some people were super passionate about it, and they finally found these outlets online that they didn't know existed, and say, okay, these are people who are like me. I'm not weird. Right. This is my community. And then you also had people who were just into it because it was the hot thing, the fair weather fans, and they'll fall by the wayside, as happens in everything else. But I came into it with this mindset because I knew, okay, we've got to differentiate ourselves from everyone else. And so we've got to take another route. And what's interesting is that sort of music industry based model is a little bit of a longer route in the sense of we haven't had a viral moment, so we don't have a hit record.
Right.
We're really on the road. And so we're building a brand and we're building an audience that's in love with us. And that takes time. So no, I don't have the views that Roman Sharf has. And I love Roman. We just had him on our show. That episode will come out soon. I don't have the views on social media that my friend Mike Nuvo has, right? Our route is different. It's longer. And I'm trying to build something where there's a lot more evergreen content that can have a much longer lifespan that people can come back to and say, man, this episode is great. Let me see what else you have. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I just found you guys, which we hear all the time.
I think virality is a bit overrated. I know it's sort of a quick way to get success, but I've always tried to make useful content as opposed to strictly popular content. And I find that over time, people discover useful content. It's just that they're not going to hear about it the day one that you publish it. And so that's sort of been my strategy. I want to say I really admire you trying to adapt the modern music industry approach to that. It's as good an approach as any. At least it's an approach. I, like you, have some background in that. I've studied the music industry for a long time. And, one of the things that is part of my generation of the music industry is it fundamentally changed from being about selling albums to something else, selling the personality and the marketing around them. Of course, concert tickets has been a big thing. But what I wanted to comment on this, and I think you'll appreciate it now, is that the band, right? The multiple member band versus a sort of solo artist. Today, it's the dominance of the solo artist. The multiple member band is relatively rare. And it used to be that it was a sort of big, 5-member band or something like that. What's changed? And it's really the economics. And similarly in this, if the economics existed for there to be a large member podcast that also has content creation, things like that, that's what it would be. But right now, the scarcity of support dollars means that everyone sort of needs to be an entrepreneur and a soloist. I know that you guys are 3, which is actually a little bit different than the norm. But I think you can appreciate how, again, when there's more money flowing, you see the development of bands. And when it's more challenging, you see the development of the solo artist.
Yeah. No, listen, that's an excellent point. And, if this were a one-man band, it would be profitable. But
you want more than that. You have bigger aspirations, and I don't blame you.
And that's the key difference is that, we do want more than that. We do have a vision of what this could be, and we're executing that vision. And, funny enough, it's now a lot larger than just the 3 of us. So the pressure is on, and we have to make even more money. But I also think, in this game, and when I think about those who have been successful content creators, and I mean really successful, the people that have gone out and got like major deals, it's always the same thing. It's like, how long can you sustain not making money before you make money? Right. And so it's really who lasts longest in the ring. And so part of being
if you're using investor dollars and you're spending more than you're making, that's the disclaimer there.
That is the disclaimer, but that's the only way you even get to that point. You need to figure out how to get your thing financed. How you put money in your own pocket is your own problem. But this thing that you're building, how do you get that to pay for itself? How do you get it to be sustainable, even if it's not profitable? Profitability is not the key right now. The key right now is you've got this baby and you got to keep it alive.
You know what the answer, I think, is for you?
Sure,
I know it's please. A bit of a vague answer, but the answer is community. People
100%
don't want to pay for content because there's at least the illusion that content is infinite and free. So why would I pay for yours if this other person's is free? That's a reality there. Brands will not support you unless they think you're giving them access to your community, right?
Yeah.
So the idea, what I find, is that the individual that you want to monetize, which is the collector, consumer, enthusiast, whatever, the thing that they want to pay for, are willing to pay for, other than the product itself, is the access to that encouraging community. And they need to be lots of communities.
And that goes back to the story I just shared with helping this club who's got this event in Michigan in the fall.
It'd be awesome if you were a manager for these guys. That'd be a great angle. I feel you. I think that'd be smart. Again, more money needs to be flowing for that. But you see the hunger for individuals in at least America to go to these events. You see that it turns them into buyers, and you see the opportunity that could exist for so many brands out there, if only they understood.
If only they understood. And it's amazing because the ones that, do get it are having a great time right now. I think about companies like Christopher Ward London that does a really good job at embracing community, at every level. They've got Mike Pearson traveling around the country, visiting collector communities and showing off the brand. And you develop loyalists that way. You know what I'm saying? And there's nothing more than many with these, these collector groups. Most of them aren't even looking to make money, right? They're just, again, they're looking for a safe space to share their passion with people. And if the brand is willing to come along and pay for that evening to engage their audience, which will be incredibly fruitful for them, they'll win. And they'll win every time. And so we do the job at embracing these collector groups and advocating on their behalf. Many of them become members of our audience, and then we'll in turn help them in whatever ways we can.
I've made an interesting observation recently, and I'd like your opinion on it. Basically, it starts with this. A lot of the people that make watches are under the belief that people buy it like art. Like they discover our art and they buy it if they like our art. They understand art in general. They know it makes us different. And if we find the right people that like our art, we'll sell art. But the reality is that not enough people understand how to appreciate art. And so what they look for is those watches, brands, experiences that connect to them. And so what ends up happening is there's a relatively small number of people that buy watches exclusively because like that's the perfect watch for them, and more about the association they have with that brand. Did they have a good time hanging out with those guys? Did people they respect like that watch and talk about it? Did it just sort of generally fit the price and colors and, they just felt positive about the brand? Yeah. So there's more community-driven purchases happening right now than I would say strictly brand-driven purchases. And that's a very important thing for, I think, the industry to wrap its mind around. I think people like yourself need to sort of take advantage of that as much as possible. And brands sometimes need to start being less delusional in the sense that people are buying products because of their experience with it and the relationship they have to the brand and the community, as opposed to strictly, is this the watch that satisfies my watch needs? Because that's actually more and more of an esoteric concept. People like me and maybe, 10 to 20% of watch lovers can truly judge watches in a complete vacuum like that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's a rarity, right? So I feel like people buy watches for two reasons. Either because they belong to a club, and again, to your point, are having this amazing experience with a brand that comes along and embrace that club, or they want to be part of a club, right? And so you have many of the indies that do an incredible job at embracing collectors groups and collectors communities, where you can have direct relationships with sometimes the owners of the brand, sometimes the watchmakers. And then you have Rolex, which is like the club everyone wants to be part of. And there's nothing that Rolex can do, I think, to make people want to buy a Rolex any less than they wanted to already or any more, right? Like, it is what it is.
It's a good point.
So, but the other brands, a lot of them have got to realize, and I saw it all the time. So after doing the podcast, I found myself in the retail side of watches. And I got to see a whole nother side of the industry that I didn't know existed. And it was the wildest 2 years of my life.
Tell some stories, please.
Well, I'll share some stories, but, to my main point is I realized that, in many cases, these brands thought, we could deliver this product that we think is amazing and people are going to love it and that's it. And you just got to sell it. And it's like, well, no, it doesn't work like that. Right. And I would always tell brands, I won't mention the retailer I worked for. What I will say is I was actually one of the guys that would allocate Rolex and Patek. That was my responsibility. So if that gives you any,
explain what
idea,
that is to people that don't know exactly what that means.
So I was an authorized dealer. So, if you wanted a Rolex or a Patek, obviously you had to come register your interest. I didn't deal with customers directly, but I was the person who approved it.
So watches would come in. That is the inventory. There was more people that wanted the inventory than there was inventory for, and you got to decide this gentleman or this gentleman gets it. And that's a position of power.
It is.
Go on.
And so, understanding the dynamics of the business, understanding what the demand was like, especially during this 2-year period, you're talking about really the height of things where it was just like insane, right? There are very few serious clients coming in and asking for brands outside of Patek, Rolex, or really Patek and Rolex.
Define serious client.
People who had the capital to actually be able to afford these watches.
So people ready to buy right now, in other words.
People ready to buy right now. People with the spend history to purchase, because it's not just coming in and buying a $50,000 watch, because everyone wants that $50,000 watch. You might have saved your $50,000 to get this watch, but that doesn't mean that it's going to you. It's going to the client that has history. So guys, women with really, really deep pockets, in many cases, very serious collectors, people who have been doing this for a very long time, have an established history, not only with the retailer, but with the brand. And you're coming in and competing with them. It's really, really tough. And so, imagine another brand coming along and saying, well, we want a piece of the pie. Good luck. It only really works one way, right? And I always like to give really great credit to H. Moser, because I would always use them as an example of what I like to tell brands, about having like a really great ground game. And going back to what we were talking about before, and they would say, what do you mean by a great ground game? Like meeting people on the level, meeting people on the floor. Like, what are you doing as a brand to engage the community? What events have you thrown?
Like, what have you, in other words, as a company, what have you done to help create more people who are interested in the brand? Because the retailer can only serve its interest. And if the consumer has literally no interest in anything but that unavailable thing, it can be challenging as a retailer to divert their attention. The brand has to do that work.
100%. If I'm converting someone, or if one of my salespeople converting someone to say, hey, I want to look at, you should really take a look at X brand. Okay, well, the next conversation that, that savvy collector is going to bring up. So what do I get for looking at X brand?
And sometimes a really nice watch is not actually a very good answer they want to hear.
Exactly.
Oddly enough.
Right?
A better answer is, well, this group of people, they like it, and you get to hang out with them and chat with them, and maybe you'll meet friends. That's actually a better answer.
100%. And the guys at Moser, they opened their offices up last year. They call it Moserland. I was there recently, a few weeks ago, with a bunch of collectors, and it's just always an incredible experience. They know how to entertain a crowd. They're fun. They're showing off the watches and let you handle them. They're people, and they treat you to a good time. And that, especially when you have these relationships, what ends up happening is, like me as a podcaster, and at that time as a retailer, I found myself in situations then, and I find myself in situations now where if I'm in a room at an event with a watch brand I love, I'm your biggest advocate. I'm walking around the room. I'm talking to people. What do you think about the watch? What do you think about the brand? This is what I love about them. This is what they're great at. They're so incredible. They did this. They did that. And then you got people say, man, I want a streamliner. I want an Endeavor. I want a Pioneer,
Right. So this is what I think the psychology is interesting here. First, they must be compelled by the brand. Second, they find a model within the brand that they like. Both of those things have to happen.
Yes.
But the reality is they will not go straight, most consumers will not go straight to, I like that model. They must first be seduced by the brand. That is a necessary step for a large number of people that buy watches today. And this is a brand responsibility. The selling the model, that can be more a salesperson. But the brand is almost strictly responsible for creating the experiences which lead people to feel like the brand has connected to them.
100%.
Okay, I guess there's nothing else to be said on that. But while we're on this topic, since a lot of brands listen to this, give them some practical advice. You talked about Moser. Not all of them can open up a space in New York City. Obviously, having events where people can see and touch your watches. But give some practical advice to the brands out there that desperately want to do these things, want to enjoy success, but don't necessarily know what to do on the ground, as you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, because the music industry is what I know, I go back to using that as a reference point. And when labels at a time before, what it's like today, when they wanted to find out what was happening, they sent people outside on the streets, whether it was the street team or they used to have a position called artists and repertoire, A&Rs. And you had people that would go hunting and say, well, what's happening outside? If you're a brand and you're trying to push your product in any market, you should know who owns the market in terms of the collective communities that exist there, right? So if I go to Atlanta, you need to tap in with the Atlanta Watch Society, right? It's almost it's almost like a mob mentality.
Let me refine this because I agree with you. So you're referring to essentially a scout, and the scout needs to go out there and determine, is there business to be made here? But this is the issue.
But they already have the scouts. That's the thing.
All of them?
They do because they visit the retailers. They have regional people that run their business.
Okay.
So if I'm dealing with, X brand as a retailer, and John Smith visits me once a month to see how we're doing with this product, while you're in town, you should make a point to understand what's happening this month in watches. How do you not know?
Okay.
Because when they would come and visit me, I would tell them what I would say, hey, I'm going to an event tonight. You really ought to come by.
And they should bring the watches and see how people respond.
Even if you don't bring any watches, we'll put a watch on your wrist. That's all you really need to do. And moonlight and engage the collector community. And you get honest feedback. If I'm represent, let's just pick a brand. Let's say Tudor. And Tudor's a bad example because everyone loves Tudor. Tudor's doing very well right now. So I'll use them for that exact reason. But if you're a rep for Tudor and you go to a Red Bar event and no one knows that you're a rep for Tudor and you're wearing a new Tudor, ask people what they think about it. Get them talking. They're getting liquored up. Ask them questions. Do your homework. Understand what's going on.
No, this is a new role though. So you're right. They do have these reps, but these people are in a slightly different position. They're incentivized as salespeople. There is no structure to sort of give them feedback on how to write these reports, to report this information, or to do these things. This is really a new role. But you're absolutely right, because prior to making a big investment in a community, like advertising in a new city or opening up a store, go to that city, sample the environment, and then make a determination. Could my brand do well here, or should I move on to another city?
100%. I mean, I did this as a retailer. I would take my salespeople with me to watch events.
Okay.
How else are you going to meet new collectors?
Sure.
How else are you going to get new customers?
Sure.
And connect with people, find out what they're talking about, what they're interested in. Right. And then I can take that information and I can chase brands and I can say, yo, we need to get this person in our location because everyone's excited about this thing. They're talking about it. How do we get them in store? Let's set up a meeting.
What would it take for you to actually want to apply this for the benefit of a watch brand? I think one of the challenges is that as an American, a lot of the job opportunities in the watch space are they're limited, or for Americans, not that great. A lot of glass ceilings, a lot of lack of authority. What would it take for a job at a brand to be compelling to you so that you could apply this type of stuff and do it? Because I'm confident that, if you were working for a brand, you did that stuff, within a couple of years, that brand would be doing real well.
I mean, the retailer I was at did very well. Record-breaking numbers.
Yeah, I'm sure. But I mean,
100%.
They're limited. Like the things you're talking about actually are more effective on the brand side. As a retailer, you have a lot of competing things, but like working at a brand, you could focus on this, similar to a Mike Pearson who's just laser focused on community. And that's the shame, is that the United States is a different culture than Europe. Yet Americans, and I've written about this for years, have an extremely limited amount of authority to make decisions about how the Swiss brands are run here.
And that's the key, right? It would take money. I'm not cheap.
Fair wages? What?
Yeah. And I need a healthy, I got to keep the discretionary income for the watch budget. So, but aside from that, when you said authority, it would take a good level of autonomy, trust, and to your point, in terms of the differences in culture between us and what's happening in Switzerland, I don't see that with very many brands. There are some brands that I believe in that would see the value in that. And if I open up the conversation, might consider it. I think they still are in a space right now where they think they know best.
Somehow they get away with that. They don't know best, but they somehow get away with being able to think that.
That's true. But I have interesting conversations with these people all the time. And because of the nature of, what's happened over the last 2 years with myself, and many of them I've known in both capacities, being an authorized dealer and at that time moonlighting as a podcaster, they were always very interested in what I thought and sort of my perspective Simultaneously, because we were very successful, that made them more interested. They were always trying to understand what was the secret sauce. But what would make it appealing for me is I have to love the brand. I've got to like the product. I need autonomy, and it's going to cost.
So
it's not free.
It goes back to the idea that the jobs aren't that exciting. Like they're sort of there, but they're not that exciting.
They're not there yet. I think that they could get there. Maybe I'm overly optimistic. I think I have to be, being in the position that I am, deciding to be a content creator now, right? Like you kind of have to be a little crazy.
But look at the province of the U.S.
We lead with passion.
The U.S., the United States, is going to remain the most important market for watches for the foreseeable future.
100%.
That is something that I've, again, talked about for years. And now I've revisited the topic because of the relative instability and weakness of much of Asia, especially China, where really a lot of the growth was hoped for. Japan's doing fantastically, and Japan will always be a strong market. But really, it's a lot of non-Japanese going there and buying from Japan. So it's a tourist market in a lot of ways right now. The United States mixes, of course, tourist purchases with a lot of locals. And so the question is, what brands will just finally figure it out? Wait a minute. If we trust an American, we'll make a lot more money than if we are insane about control.
It's almost so obvious. And I have conversations like this very often. And I always use an example. And people think I'm crazy until they actually think about it, right? But what's the biggest brand in watches?
According to what measure?
I mean, you know the answer to this. By sales,
you're talking about like a Rolex type of situation, or we're talking
Rolex is the largest. They are
luxury.
They are it. They're the behemoth, right?
Yeah.
But I find it interesting. Here's a company that makes 1.2, 1.3 million watches, right? The vast majority of them are coming here. When you look at Rolex's history, and you talk about, the seductive nature of, what really creates and pushes a brand upward, it's interesting to me that when most consumers of Rolex don't even think Swiss-made watches when they think Rolex. We know that they're made in Switzerland. We know that this is a Swiss company, but the company is so large and has all of this history that they run on that they almost seem like an American company.
Okay, so
they have a very American identity.
It's true. Compared to what we know about Switzerland, it is not a traditionally Swiss person. I mean, if you go there, that's different. But the outward appearance is much more international.
And their approach to marketing, their approach to how they engage consumers, the programs that they create, the feelings that they tap into, it's like textbook 101 American marketing and branding.
It's true, but also emulating that is almost like replicating the Vatican. Like it took years and years of many people refining something.
My position is not that your brand can become Rolex. That's not the pitch, right? But the pitch is, imagine what could happen for your brand if you thought a little different.
But it just comes down to spending. It's like, imagine what would happen if you invested a little bit. I mean, like all roads lead to open your wallet.
You got to think differently. They have to think differently in order to want to spend.
They have to feel confident that the money they put in will get the money back. It's as simple as that. They're bankers.
And I think even that formula is very American.
That they're conservative?
No, the idea that I put money in, it comes back. I think that what we're dealing with the watch industry is something that is way more cultural.
But Americans make speculative investments. Europeans don't. They are really scrutinized for doing so. In America, it's like, do something crazy and wild because it's the only way to win big. And that's true. In Switzerland, it's like, do something crazy and wild, and that's the way to be socially ostracized for the rest of your life.
I guess what I'm trying to articulate is, to me, the crazy and wild thing is to spend money with us.
Yeah.
Right?
Again, the psychology is something that I think we're narrowing on the same thing. They have to feel comfortable giving up control in exchange for making more money. They are profit driven. They like money more than anything. They just have to recognize, hey guys, you'll make more money if you let go of some control. Imagine that. I know it's risky. I know it sounds scary, not calling all the shots and having someone who doesn't speak French running a big market for you. But you could be making a hell of a lot more money. And then won't you be happier than having all the control? Yeah. That's really the argument we're trying to make.
Yeah. No, it is. It is. So, maybe they'll hear this and the conversations will change. We'll see.
Oh, they hear this stuff. That's the thing. They do hear it. But again, they're like, wait a minute. Did that conversation involve us giving up control? We're not sure about that. The way to do it is to show one brand that took the risk, was successful, and then that validates it, right? This is a follow the leader industry.
It is.
So all we need to do is get a couple of strong-minded individuals. And remember, it goes back to having someone who's creative and willing to be open-minded on the Swiss side. Mm-hmm. That eliminates all the corporate guys. Sorry. If you're at a corporate brand, you're just unable to do that. And it eliminates a lot of the ones that are just strictly conservative. So we have a relatively small number of companies who culturally are set to do that, but it requires that individual in Switzerland being open-minded to hiring the right person or people in the United States to grow the market, the rest of the industry to take a look at it and be like, wait a minute, that's
what's happening there.
They then, and this is crucial, they then believe it's their own idea and they will apply it because they think that it's something which is okay with their folks because their neighbor did it successfully and now they're destined to make money. And I hate to break it down in such a way, but that's the exact process that needs to happen.
Sounds like the music industry.
It's not that different. I mean, look, music, because look, what it is you're investing a lot of money behind a product that's very technical to make, a watch and a song, very technical to make. You have a group of people who can't really know whether or not it's going to be commercially successful. It just takes a lot of good taste to be like, watch is done, song is done. And then when you release it, it could be instantly successful or it could be discovered years later. The actual quality of the thing is not directly related to the popularity or its profitability. Because the popularity engine is different than sort of the quality assessment engine. So same thing with movies. Bunch of people get together to make a film, takes months, if not years to put together, a huge amount of money. Do they know if it's going to be successful? No, it's the 80-20 rule all the time. 80% is going to flop, 20% is going to do well, but you'll never find the 20% unless you take chances.
You got to take the risk.
And I'll tell you something that they don't have in Switzerland. A modern music or film industry. So they don't know this stuff, Perri. They don't know. We have to take them to more music events.
Excellent point. Yeah.
We only have a couple of minutes, and I want to talk about what I call podcast discovery. And one of the weird things that I've noticed is that when I ask most people, where did you learn about the podcast you're listening to? They don't say like, well, the platform I downloaded them from suggested it. They don't say that it was advertised to them. They don't say that there was like a portal of like discovering good podcasts, anything like that. They just said a friend recommended it to me. And I think it's interesting to comment on the fact that as prolific as the podcasting space is right now, when it comes to initial discovery of a show or a new episode even, that's really up to, I don't want to say chance, but peer-to-peer recommendation. Mm-hmm. So I'd love your thoughts on that as well as what do you think could change from a technological or tool-based approach in this space for it to be better for people to discover podcasts and easier for creators like us to be discovered?
Excellent question. You know as well as I do, the algorithm does not favor quality.
No.
Not at all. So, from a technological standpoint, to be honest, in terms of what the platforms can offer, I'm not certain. And what I've seen, being implemented by various platforms, especially the ones that we use recently, like there was a thing where, if you wanted your podcast or your content to be successful on YouTube, you used to buy bots. That's what people used to do, right? You drum up the numbers, the algorithm would see that it was getting popular, and then it would start suggesting you.
Right.
And so...
Very rudimentary and unethical.
Completely unethical. But that's how a lot of podcasts became popular before COVID. And
how a lot of Instagram accounts became popular on Instagram before they put stop at that.
100%. The algorithm has since put a stop to that, right? They know how to sniff out bots, they shut down accounts, etc. But if you'll notice now, they want the creators to pay to play. And so there's a lot more services that they're offering and saying, hey, we'll get you more views if you spend money with us. We'll put your stuff in this section and that section, which to me is just as unethical. Because they've just replaced the bots and said, well, let us take the money now. So I don't trust the platforms to provide us with any tools outside of just the place to host
distribution. Just distribution.
That's it. That's what we use them for. And thank you for that. Now, one of the things that we do is, again, early on, when we first started the podcast, we started doing seasons. And the reason why we did that was we could take a break and kind of assess what happened and make pivots. And in that first season, at the end of the season, when we had VJ Geronimo on the show, CEO of Oris, we realized that just by having him on, how many people that introduced us to, right? We were then able to tap in another audience by promoting our show in collaboration with VJ, right? Oh my gosh, VJ is on the show. This is cool. I want to listen to this. And so our strategy going forward has been having a diverse group of guests on the show. And so it allows us to continually tap into different kinds of audiences and see who sticks. And so what we'll find is if I have, Eric Wind on the show, there's a lot of people that are in tune, and Eric's a dear friend of mine. I love him to death. There's a lot of people who are in tune with what Eric does, and they'll say, okay, well, I'm going to check out this podcast because Eric was on. They check out Eric's episode. It's a great episode. They say, I'll check out another one. Oh my God, this is really good. Some of them stick around. And then they start referring us to their friends. And so we've, again, the same spirit, I'm casting a very wide net. I've had collectors on our show. I've had watch dealers on our show. I've had CEOs on our show. I've had rappers on our show, and we're tapping into various different communities of watch enthusiasts, people, to your point made earlier, the brands are not speaking to, and they're referring us to their friends.
We're basically out of time. We'll have to continue this conversation. I encourage everyone to listen to the Risk Check podcast. But Perri, let anyone else know about anywhere on the internet that they can learn more about you or what you want them to check out.
Yeah, you can find us at riskcheckpod.com. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. We've got audio and visual on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and more. You can follow us on Instagram at riskcheckpod. Myself is at Perri Dash. And we engage our audience. So feel free to drop us a direct message. We respond to everyone. It might take us some time, but we'd love to talk to you.
Perri, I want to thank you so much. This has been the Superlative Podcast with Perri Dash. Thanks so much for chatting.
Thank you.